I'm your host, Joel Marshall, and this is Interview Friday. Today on the show, got a great guest today, Joyce Hshieh. She's just an amazing person because she helps actors learn their lines faster, which is it's just like an amazing service that I think that no one that I know of has ever even talked about. So I'm so glad to have her on the show. I want to make a couple announcements before we get into this thing. I have I'm lucky enough to be doing stand-up comedy in Ventura this weekend at a thing called JR's Comedy Club. You'll recognize two of the people there on the flyer besides the one at the bottom. Headliner Keith Ross Nelson, who's been on the show. I'm not sure what episode he was on, but early on in Lunch Therapy, he was on there. And then, of course, Gayla Johnson, one of my best friends in the entertainment industry, hilarious comedian. We're going to be holding down the fort at JR's Comedy Club Saturday night. If anybody's out there in Ventura, at the Black Bear Diner. I hear they got a lot of good food there. The address is there. The link is in the show notes. If you can't get there, call me. Just call me. You know my number. No, I don't put out my number. What, Boney? We can't don't put my number on the screen, Boney. My assistant is trying to give people my phone number. Equal Means Equal is here. Join us for some fun. Yeah. Hoy, Mary Marks. On the show, we don't say hi, we say hoy. So if you feel the need to say hi, I guess you got to go to another show to do that. All right, let's get into this thing called Lunch. I'm gonna get myself a modem. 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 All right, we're in the studio getting ready to get Joyce on the show. I met Joyce over the internet, and she was talking about her program called Off Book It, and I was like, I have to get this person on the show because I think that, like I was saying before, a lot of times in acting, they're like, learn your lines, and then we'll do our thing. And so many different acting techniques have different attitudes about lines. And then we also get a lot of different information about how to learn lines that is just sort of random, but no one ever teaches it until today. So now we have Joyce. We're just really lucky to have her. We're going to talk to her about that. But first, on this show, we always breathe. We always take 3 deep breaths. And today is no exception. Here we go, Healing Vibrations. One of our favorite ways to calm down. Healing Vibrations. In through the nose, out through the toes. Hold it. Let it go. Heading to Ventura. Love Ventura. It's a beautiful place. I also like Oxnard, which has a weird name, but it's also a terrific place to go. Always breath, Jason Edelman says. In through the nose, out through the toes. Hold it. Let it go. One more. Take a breath in through the nose. Hold it. And let it go. Mary Marks is on her power plate. I was talking to Mary Marks last night, and I was telling her I have this device that my mom gave me. She sent this thing called a power plate, which is a thing that you stand on and it vibrates. And apparently, it's very good for you. You only do like 9 minutes a day, or you do your workout on it. I don't know. We're going to have to investigate that in future shows. But she's on her power plate. I bet, am I shaking on your power plate? I wonder. All right, so this is a parrot. This is sent to me by one of our favorite people out there that makes animal videos for us, Kate Gemmel. She's going to NYU Film School coming soon, coming this fall. So we want to send a shout out to her and thank you so much for sending us videos of fun animals that we can do on our show. Jason Edelman says, and squat, and squat, and squat. That must be what they do on the power plate. Yeah, you work out on the thing. Thanks to all the Patreons. If you want to become a Patreon, go to patreon.com/Joel Marshall. Sign up. You can give us $1 a month, or you could give us $1,000 a month, or $1 million a month, whatever you want to do. It's hugely appreciated because this show runs on hummingbirds. Even though there are parrots behind me, it runs on hummingbirds. Let's get into this thing. Let's stop the babble and let's get into an interview Friday with Joyce Hshieh. Okay. So Joyce Hshieh is a trained actor, and graduated from the acting program at the theater school at DePaul University. She's also a 3-day champion on the game show Jeopardy, which is super exciting to a lot of us out there because those people are amazing, and I don't know how they do it, and she's one of them. So I don't know. This might be how she developed her memory techniques. I'm not sure, but I want to hear more about that. She's also been seen in the independent film Shelter, which is about people stuck in a bomb shelter, and you can get that on YouTube. You can rent that on YouTube. Very interesting. They're stuck in a bomb shelter after apparently a nuclear devastation, but they don't really realize it when they get there. They're just like, hey, what's going on? We have to go in here. It was kind of like, it's a movie like COVID where they're like, this could take days. And then they're there for months and months and months, and like you wonder what happens to them. She has also done Q&As and been a featured guest on the Actors Breakfast Club, Blythe Howard's Commercial Workshop, The Actor Playbook, and this podcast called Why I'll Never Make It podcast. I've got to listen to that one. That sounds intriguing. But most importantly, she's the founder of the Off Book It program, where through her course and coaching, she teaches actors how to memorize lines more efficiently in a way that is fun and creative. And she has helped many actors overcome their line memorization hurdles to achieve freedom and confidence in their acting. Without further ado, let's get Joyce on the show. This is Interview Friday.
Hey there, I'm Joyce Hshieh, and I'm the founder of offbookit.com, where I help actors just like you learn how to memorize lines fast and make them stick. So, line memorization. Typically, it's tedious, it's boring, and it takes forever. But I'm here to tell you that it doesn't have to be that way. Researchers have been studying the mind for a long time at this point, and they've actually figured out quite a lot about how we learn and remember things best. We can actually use these findings to our advantage and hack the line memorization process.
I like it. All right, Joyce. Welcome to Lunch Therapy.
Thank you so much for having me, Joel.
Thank
you so much.
Yeah, when I heard that you were teaching people how to get off book, I was like, oh my God, I've been waiting for this for years.
Yeah, haven't we all?
I know. Did you ever have trouble learning lines? Is this what this came out of, or what?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I definitely was someone that struggled with lines. So like you said in the intro, I went to the theater school at DePaul University. It was a conservatory program. And I remember during all that time that lines never just came easily to me. I actually went up on my lines in a performance while, one of the performances in school. And that was like one of the most terrifying experiences. I don't know. anyone else has had that happen, it's just like, what do? You feel like the floor is just opening up a
Seems
giant
like
pit in
time
front of you.
expands. Like what
Yeah.
is seconds? It seems like minutes. Seems like hours. The um, yeah, Dustin Hoffman. I saw him in a play. I think it was Measure
Hmm.
for Measure, or yeah, maybe it was Measure for Measure. Anyway, in London, and he went up on his lines,
Mm.
and I saw him turn to the audience, take a breath, and it was a little while, and then he just went right back into it.
Oof.
And yeah, it might have been Merchant of Venice. I think it was Merchant of Venice, but yeah. And I was like, oh, everybody goes up on their lines. It just happens, and you have to like kind of know like what to do when that happens, or find like better techniques for getting them in your body and your brain solidly. What
Right.
did
In the
did you
first place.
try different things originally, or like how did this, I know that you've been on a journey with this.
For sure, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at that time, like you said, there's no training for this. There was no class. When it got brought up in classes, teachers would say different things. So, I got different advice from acting teachers. Like there were some that were saying just memorize by rote, like just try to recite everything monotone. You don't want to get it stuck in this one way of interpreting it. So just do it mechanically over and over by rote until you can get it in you. And that never worked for
Me
me.
either.
Does it work? I don't know if it
No,
works for
I
anyone. I
think
know
maybe for somebody, don't you
some
think like people
people,
are different? People are different in the way they take
yes,
things in.
that's true.
Somebody it worked for because they told us to. I think they didn't know how to tell us to learn lines. And I
I
think there
agree.
was some kind of, it's almost like sometimes comedians don't want to talk about what's funny because they think they'll jinx it in some way. Or they think, because
Hmm.
it's such an unknown thing, like how things stick in your brain, that I don't think people actually know about it. So they don't want to talk about it. And it comes off a little bit like they dismiss it
Mm.
almost like they don't want to admit because it shows a sign of weakness that they struggle with it, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I think there's something to that where yeah, they don't want to admit that they don't know.
Yeah, yeah,
And so it's just kind of, they're just sort of guessing.
yeah.
Um,
Have
yeah,
you heard the
so
one where you like write down the first letter of every word? I've heard people just talk about that. I'm like, that sounds insane. Like that, I don't think that would help me. I never tried it, but like you're willing to try anything if you're trying to get stuff, in there.
right, right. Yeah,
Also, we
I
go to
have heard
theater
that one.
school and we learn the lines while we're rehearsing the play. And then we come
Yes.
to Hollywood and they're like, here's a script. Look at it for 5 minutes and then do it for me. And they're like, why aren't you off book? What's wrong with you? And then you start to go, what is wrong with me? I don't know. You know?
Right, right. It's so weird that there's just this expectation that you're supposed to be able to do it, even
Yeah.
though you never got any sort of like training or like solid grounding in how to do it properly. So yeah, so that was super frustrating for
Yeah.
me at the time. I was someone who was like, there was always this weird transition period when you're like getting off book during a play and like I mean, I would just be calling line like every 3 seconds,
Yeah.
And yeah, but it was much later that I discovered that there were actually very real practical things that we could implement.
Yeah.
Like it didn't have to be this total guessing and guessing game. Like there are actual books out there. There is actual research out there about how the human brain learns and remembers things. And
Yeah.
there are principles that are based on, these findings. And it's just a matter of knowing about them and like implementing them into the process. And so that was just like a revelation for me. Like,
It is.
you know,
Yeah. Like, and I don't think, I mean, you kind of got to find it yourself. It sounds like from the stories that I've heard, you found it because of Jeopardy, because you were doing contests in bars, like a trivia contest and things, and then that made you start looking into memorization, or is that what happened?
yeah, yeah. So Yes. So I was doing bar trivia with friends on a regular basis, and it was just for fun. It was like completely separate worlds.
Yeah.
It had nothing to do with acting.
Yeah.
But I was somebody who was just interested in a lot of different things. In outside of acting. I'm always trying to learn things. I like to read a lot. I like to learn about science and psychology and philosophy, literature, all kind history. It's just like it's very like a big world out there to me, just
Hmm.
of things to learn and to integrate into my knowledge about stuff. So I think I was learning a lot about things at the time. I happened to come across books about memory that were really, really interesting. I think the first book I read was called Moonwalking with Einstein.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
this like New York Times bestseller. It was back in, I think it came out in like the early 2000s or something. And it's about this guy who he discovers the world of memory champions, memory competitions.
Hmm.
So there are people out there, they compete in tournaments around the world
Yeah.
where they do these events where they can memorize like a whole deck of cards really quickly. They can memorize names and faces really quickly, like super long strings of numbers, things
Yeah.
like that. And it's amazing. Like
It
when you see
is.
these people, you sometimes see them on TV where
Hmm.
they'll demonstrate these things, or there's some documentaries out there as well. And like when you see them, you think, oh my God, like these people must be super geniuses or something. Like
Yeah.
they must have incredible IQs or, extraordinary abilities.
Yeah.
And what you learned from this book is that they're actually just implementing these very simple techniques that anybody, any person can learn and use. And there it is,
There's
Moonwalking with
that book.
Einstein.
Yeah.
And these techniques, they actually go back thousands of years. Like they have a long history. They go back to the ancient Greeks and Romans when they were, learning, uh, giving
Right.
speeches, and
Yes.
so it's like it's just this forgotten
I
field
don't
of
know why it got
knowledge.
swept under the rug. I don't understand what happened. And a lot of times when you read the memorization books, the person starts the book out by saying, I don't didn't think I had a good memory." So I started looking
Yeah,
into it, and then I found these techniques, and now all of a sudden I'm, winning competitions. And
yeah,
and you'd
yeah.
think that this would be something that we'd all be doing. I think maybe also back in the day, there people memorized things more often because we had told
Yes.
stories to one another, and we did. And also there'd be the troops of actors, like in Shakespeare's time. They would be like, "What play are we doing tonight? We're doing King Lear. You be Lear. You be." So they had to really like. A lot of times they didn't even. They would even tell them. They would even tell them their part. Like, this is what you're going to
Uh-huh.
say. You know what I mean? Like, it was written in different pieces of paper that they put together in the folio later. So
Right.
I think those
I,
techniques might have gotten lost a bit, or we didn't value them enough.
I definitely think that's the case. It's because of technology. It's because of the we started writing things down.
Yeah,
Yeah, like if you think of in the past how storytelling was all oral storytelling, how did they remember all those things? Well, they used some of these techniques out there, and yeah. So I think it's just over time, the advent of certain technologies made these things not as important, I guess, to people. And then now, if you think about how we just have phones where we kind of almost
I know.
outsource our brains into our phones,
Totally.
like it's
It's
yeah,
getting
we
where we
kind
get
of
weaker and weaker
lose.
at it. Howard Aronin says,
Absolutely.
I was going to order some memorization books, but it slipped my mind. Yeah, yeah. So I'm going to play a clip of one of your techniques called
Sure.
chunking, which is something that we use all the time.
Yes.
Line memorization quick tip chunking. Before memorizing a monologue, break it into smaller chunks first. Here's how you do it you want to reformat your monologue so you have one phrase per line. Then put a space between each beat. When you're done, the monologue should look more like stanzas in a poem rather than a big, fat paragraph. This makes it much cleaner, less intimidating, and easier to work with.
Wow, chunking. So that's really interesting. Really interesting. Um, can you tell us about like how you came to that? Was that something that you learned somewhere, or what?
Yeah. So that that is like that's actually like something that it's called chunking, like in cognitive psychology. This
Hmm.
is like the field where I took that insight from. They call it that chunking, which is just breaking down information into smaller pieces and yeah, and that making it more manageable. And so it's like I kind of like saw that and
Hmm.
kind of went, all right, how do I apply that to a script? You know,
Yeah,
how does that make sense for working with that technique with a script? And you know, breaking things into beats is an example of that, and that's like a pretty common technique that actors use
yeah.
to analyze their script.
Hmm.
But then yeah, I could see how it was like, well, this would especially be important for monologues because monologues are just this giant intimidating thing, and if you just break it down into smaller pieces, like it's just going to be easier.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just like connecting the dots at some
It's
point.
so interesting because we do that with credit cards and we credit card numbers and phone numbers, and we do it already. We're already doing it, but we just don't know why we're doing it. And
Yeah, and it just makes sense.
our,
And also, I
social
guess
security numbers, everything is chunked like that. Greg Wardla, who's a
exactly.
teacher, says chunking is also a term used in teaching reading. That's
Oh,
interesting.
nice. Yeah.
Um,
I think also with specifically like the monologues like that,
mhm.
uh, it was easy to come up with that too, because, you know, Shakespeare monologues or like
I thought
verse
the same thing.
monologues
Yeah. Yeah.
are like that already. So it was
Yeah.
like, oh, like I can, you know, actually, my opinion is that Shakespeare is easier to memorize than prose text.
Yeah.
And it's for several reasons, one of which is the format of how they do it with the verse and how
They chunk it
you
for
know,
you.
yeah, they chunk it for you basically. Or
Pre-chunked.
um yes, yes. And also like yeah, the rhythm and the structure of the verse like makes it much more memorable.
Oh, and it
So
sticks
it's
in
like,
your
well,
head
how
longer too. Like it stays
yeah,
with you. You and I both could recite Shakespeare right now because we've done it before, you know?
yeah, yeah. So it was like, well, how do you just make a prose monologue
I did
kind of
this
more
too.
like that?
And when I was developing my memorization technique, which I won't go into right now, but I started chunking naturally. I was doing it in like OneNote. I was putting in my lines, and I was putting all my lines in, not just. I didn't have any breaks in it at all. I just made it like a
Mhm.
monologue because that was helping me for some reason, and I chunked them like that. And I don't know why. I think it just was maybe it just fit on the phone better. I don't know, but it really,
Mhm.
really seemed to help. But I didn't know why. Now I know
It's
something
interesting.
about that. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
it's there's so much to this. I just want to mention this. When I was at Shakespeare and Company in Massachusetts, they used to help us memorize our lines, but they had a very specific technique, and I think it was from Kristen Linkletter,
Oh.
but it was time consuming. So their whole thing was they want to get it in your body, like they want you to memorize this thing in your cells. And so what they would do is you would lie down on the ground, and somebody would stand over you with the text. And sometimes you had to team do this because if you were playing a whole Shakespearean role, it took a while. And they'd go word for word, and this is something I think you talk about as well. They go word for word, and they'd be like, two, two. How many brothers do you have? Two, two. What? Did you get second place? What's two? What to be or not to be? Two, two, two. They just have all these different references to the word two, and you would be breathing and saying two over and over and over again, and they'd move to the next word. Bee, bee, bee. Did you get stung by a bee? Are you allergic to bees? What's a what? They say all this stuff,
Wow.
and you'd go through the entire script that way. But you did find that it was like really in you. by the time you got to opening night or whatever. And I don't know what that I think you have a technique like that is called, what is that called? That is about getting all the different concepts around it, or like
elaboration is that,
elaboration. Is that it?
maybe that it sounds like it's a form of that, because they're sort of, what is it? It seems like they're trying to get every sort of connotation around every single word and kind of making it more meaningful and stuff. I would say that's probably a form of elaboration. I mean, there's multiple ways where you can elaborate, it's just basically trying to, whatever it is you're trying to remember, to give it as much meaning and richness as possible, so that it's not just like, boring, empty text.
Right.
That's the problem with rote memorization, which is the hardest way to memorize anything, because it doesn't mean anything. You have nothing for your mind to hang on to. It has to have richness, meaning, emotional connection. That is what makes things memorable. So, that's
what I think sometimes we don't realize as theater actors, is that when we do the rehearsal process, we're hanging these lines on the stage essentially, and actions, and that's why some acting teachers will tell you, you don't know your lines because you don't know your intention. You don't know what you're going after. You don't know why you're saying the line, and so it's very helpful. But it's like, that's a long process, and when somebody hands you a script and goes, "You got to do this thing in an hour," you can do all the work you can, but that you're not necessarily, what you don't realize is you're not hanging the lines on anything. So they're just floating out, or at least for me, and I don't know whether I'm dyslexic or what, but the lines are just kind of floating out there, and I could grab anyone. And then you get into the casting director's office, which we used to do, and they're just out the window. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that happens sometimes.
So that's like some of the techniques that you have. How do you help people hang the lines on something, or give them some kind of anchor for the lines?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's several things that are part of my process, but yeah, definitely, what you were talking about, I'm definitely more so in that camp of like analyzing your text, understanding your intentions is going to help with the memorization. So, being very specific about why are you saying that? Like being very specific with your text in that way. So it's not just in general, what is it I want? What am I trying to get? But like really hooking it into, this is why I'm saying this specifically. Looking at the specific word choices. So it's like, why is it this word and it's not this word? That's especially helpful. It's easier when the writing is good,
isn't it? Though,
of course,
isn't it?
Like,
do you ever do that? You pick up a script, and you're like, why did I learn this thing so quickly? Oh, it was like a great writer, like Tennessee Williams wrote this or something.
Exactly. When the writing is good, it's like, it makes sense. It's logical. And like, you can find what you're trying to do as an actor. It's so much easier, right? But if the writing is bad, you kind of just have to like make it up yourself. But no, when the writing is good, it's like, oh, it's such a breeze.
But a lot of times we get stuff that's in a certain stage that's not even completed. Like they're just trying to get the character, but they're still writing the script. And so we go in there, and also a lot of times we get really technical stuff. Like if we're going into a procedural, sometimes we get like, and a lot of times I think they're trying to see if you can spit it out. You know what I mean?
Like they're challenging you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I found the elaboration clip. I'm going to play it here.
Okay.
Elaboration is a learning strategy that involves enriching and encoding information you're trying to remember with a lot of details and connections. By beefing up the material with these connections, you gain an in-depth, multidimensional understanding, which makes it a lot stickier and easier to remember. So where do you start when it comes to elaborating your script? Well, imagine you're a really annoying child in the backseat of a car and simply ask a lot of questions. Why is my character saying that? Why is my character doing that? What is my character trying to get? What is the problem here? More specifically, make sure you're paying close attention to the exact wording of the script. Don't treat any of the words as arbitrary. When you make specific choices about why your character is using those exact words, it makes it much easier to remember.
That makes so much sense. The thing is also sometimes the acting technique or the acting teacher that you're working with or coach, they want you to do things in a particular way. And sometimes they will tell you that. They'll be like, don't learn it by rote because you're going to get stuck in a certain pattern. Unless you learn it like as flat as possible. Even like Sanford Meisner would be like, just learn it by rote. Don't put any emotion on it. Don't do anything. And then you're ready to start working. And then there are other acting teachers that are like, no, just like as you go along, the words will come because you'll be able to get your objective. You'll be able to get the intention, the actions, the beats, and that kind of thing, and it'll naturally show up. And I remember at Steppenwolf, when I worked at Steppenwolf years ago, some of the actors would have their script in their back pocket all the way up to previews.
Wow.
And I was like, man, that's gutsy. You know what I mean? Because it didn't look like they were going to memorize their lines. And some of the great actors, like we always hear stories of Marlon Brando in On the Waterfront. He's in one of the most famous acting moments on film. He put his lines supposedly all over the inside of the car and had them taped up. He obviously, and he was one of the greatest actors there is. And I think he was trying to keep it, like they say, keep it fresh, maybe, or something. But also he might have had a problem with it. I mean, who am I to say? So where do you usually start with people? Because isn't there an emotional thing around it, like shame or a feeling that you're not good enough, like a lot of actors have? Isn't there a lot of emotional charge that goes on with this stuff?
Oh yeah. Yeah. There's I feel like a very unfair stigma out there when it comes to this problem. A lot of actors, I feel like they don't like to talk about it if they have trouble. And, I've had students where, they are great, talented actors. They've been in the industry for decades, and this has just been a thing that just hangs over their heads. They don't like to talk about it, or like they maybe don't even want to give me a testimonial because they don't want to put their name on it and be associated with it or something. Or they'll give me like an anonymous one or something. But I mean, I think it's just very unfair because it's just this ignorance about it. Because I think people sort of think, well, if you can't know your lines, like
you must not be a good actor.
That you're just terrible. I mean? You're just talentless.
Yeah.
Like, why are you even doing this? Like, get out of here. Like,
what they don't even know sometimes is that there are actors, famous actors that we know that wear ear prompters and have somebody off stage, like reading the script to them. Like there's a lot of really famous ones that we know. And, maybe they're lazy or maybe they are also having trouble, but they don't want to admit it because they're on $1 million set,
Right. And this is something I learned a while back. I don't know if you knew Stanislavski, the godfather of modern acting, right? Yeah. Who is like created the whole system and everything. Yeah. He had trouble memorizing lines.
He did.
He talked about it in his autobiography.
Isn't that
and
great?
Yeah, so it's like even the best actors out there, they struggled with this, and it actually doesn't. I don't see it a correlation whether your talent on your talent.
It doesn't.
It doesn't say anything really about your talent. Like I know it definitely can kind of get in the way of like you showing exactly what you want to show.
Mhm.
But yes, a lot of actors they've managed to get by somehow. It's just still a struggle for them,
Yeah.
despite it.
It
But
also, one
yeah,
of the things about auditioning or being an actor is in Los Angeles at least, you have to be very confident to go into a room and give them the confidence that, especially if you don't have like a huge resume, give them the confidence that when you get on set, you're going to be able to deliver. And I think that happens too. Sometimes on set, people get in on set and they're deer in the headlights because they don't have a technique to fall back on about memorization. They might have worked on the thing forever. They might have said the lines over and over. They might have gone out into a field and yelled the lines or done all the different weird techniques that people say. And then they get on set and they're like, deer in the headlights, and they start to think they're never going to get a job again. It slows down production, all that stuff. So this is why this is so important, what you're saying. It's just when what you're doing for people,
right.
not
Yeah.
only actors, but for comedians and people that have to give big speeches. I'm thinking of one presidential person right now that might want to take your class.
Could use a little bit of help, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Can you tell us how you use, first of all, how do you use this technique for the Jeopardy? Like, what happened there where you were like, I'm going to be, first of all, what's the process for getting on Jeopardy?
For sure.
Yeah.
The process is, getting on Jeopardy was actually a total surprise to me. I
Really?
wasn't planning on it or anything. So like I said, I was doing like bar trivia with friends every week, on a
Yeah.
regular basis at the time. And I started watching Jeopardy on the regular because I was like, oh, maybe this will help my bar trivia game. Like,
Yeah.
I'll just improve by watching Jeopardy. And and occasionally on the show, they will put out a call where they're like, hey, we're looking for new contestants. You can take the online quiz and try to get on the show. And so they just do that every once in a while. I think like probably a few times a year. And so I was like, oh, that might be cool. Let me just try it like for fun. I didn't
Yeah.
actually think anything was gonna happen. I was like, let me just do it for fun. And so I took the online quiz and it was like, okay. Uh, and I think like months later, I got an email from them asking me to do an in-person audition for them. So they do these regional auditions around the country where they go to different cities and they kind of get a group of people together that had passed the online quiz.
Hmm.
And so I was in Chicago at the time, and so I got invited to the one in Chicago that they were doing. And so I went to that again, not thinking that anything was going to come of it.
Yeah.
I was just going for fun,
Yeah.
like on a whim, like, okay. And so the audition, it consisted of you do another quiz for them, but it's in person that you take it. You do an interview with them, and then you do like a mock game. So you're actually like standing up there with other people with the buzzer and you're
Mhm.
like actually playing a game. And so that, they're just seeing how you would be like on the actual show. And so I did that, and I think like maybe a month later I got a call from them asking me to be on the show, and I was like, oh my God,
Oh my
really? Like,
God.
what?
There you
Again, I'm
are.
just like not thinking this is gonna happen every step of the way. But
Wow.
yeah, so then I got invited to be on the show. I had about a month to prepare, and I was like kind of freaking out. I was like, this is my one chance to be on this show. Like, I should try to do everything in my power to win, right? So
Yeah.
I was just like studying like crazy. And And then yeah, so I ended up on the show. I was like very, very nervous actually, because I think I put a lot of pressure on myself to like to win, because I was like, I want to win, like
Yeah.
this is my once in a lifetime opportunity. Um, so yeah, so I got there and met Alex Trebek, which was amazing. Like, now that he's like gone, it's like
Yeah.
amazing that I got to be on the show during his era. Like,
Hmm.
I really appreciate that. So,
And
but
you won for 3 days in a row.
yes, yes. So I
And
won
did
three
you
days and
call on your techniques, your memory techniques? Did that does that help you with trivia? Because doesn't trivia just like you just have to know a lot of stuff? Do you try and
yeah,
cram
yeah.
in a lot of stuff? Is there a way that you study? Like,
Yeah, so I think at the time I was like the memory techniques were like still fairly new. Like I had already read Moonwalking with Einstein at that point. And so I think I was trying to do like almost like a combination of things. I was like, let me just try everything. Like,
yeah.
like so I think in addition to like these techniques that can like enhance your
Mhm.
memory, I think actually just almost naturally, I think I have a pretty decent memory
Mhm.
for certain things.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, because I mean, memorizing trivia is definitely like a different thing from like memorizing a script
Yeah.
and text and stuff. But yeah, but certain techniques you can kind of like use for both. But yeah, at the time, um, yeah, it was kind of like a weird combination of things. And then like also afterward, I was still like reading stuff about memory stuff. There was actually this book that I read. It was by a Jeopardy champion. He wrote
Mhm.
this book called Prisoner of Trebekistan.
Yeah.
It's like a very entertaining book,
It's
but
funny.
he talks about his journey getting on Jeopardy.
Rebecca
And
Stan.
also yeah, but he also talks about the memory techniques that he used to like to learn a lot of the facts and the trivia and stuff. And so it was like that was also like reading that book was like an introduction to certain things as well.
While you were telling
But
this
yeah.
story, I was watching your eyes. Do you
Hmm.
think are the eyes a clue to how you're retrieving things? Because you were up like this for certain things when you were talking about being on the show. I'm not sure whether you were visualizing being on the show, Alex Trebek, all that stuff. And then other times you're like, and I read in a book, and the book said, and you looked down like you were reading the book. Do
Yeah.
these are these clues to like how people retrieve things, how people memorize things, and are people different? Is everybody different?
I think so. I think there is something to that because there is like, yeah, like you're saying, like looking up, there's a visual component
Yeah.
to memory. And that's actually the basis of those techniques that I was talking about from Moonwalking with Einstein, those ones
Hmm.
that go back like thousands of years. The basis of that is imagery, striking images, because
Yes.
the human mind just has a very, very strong affinity for images. And so a lot of those techniques are really about transforming whatever it is you're trying to memorize into a striking image. And a lot of times they're like
Totally.
super weird, right? Like that's what the
Yes.
origin of the title Moonwalking with Einstein is. It's like
Oh,
this guy is picturing Einstein moonwalking, and it's correlating to a specific thing he's trying to remember. But yeah, coming up with like just weird, wacky stuff like that, and actually picturing it in your mind's eye, um, is a very, very powerful technique. Um, that being said, yeah, yes, everyone is a little bit different.
mhm.
There are people out there where they have actually they don't have a mind's eye even. There's like a condition, it's called aphantasia,
Mm.
where it's kind of odd. I think it's pretty rare, but certain people out there, they
Aphantasia.
actually can't visualize
Wow.
things. So it's sort of like, how are they processing
That's got to be
information and stuff?
hard. Yeah, that's got to be hard. For
Yeah.
me, I was like that was the key for me. I had gone to a coach, Vernis Clear, who's a set coach for a lot of famous actors, and I had gone to meet with her, and I was just frustrated. I'd lost my acting career completely. I didn't know what I was doing. And I was like, why is that? And she was like, well, what are some of your obstacles? And I was like, well, one obstacle is I just don't feel completely off book when I go into these auditions, or something could throw me so easily. You know, they could ask me a question or whatever. I just don't feel confident about it. I've done tons of Shakespeare. I've done millions of plays. I don't really go up on lines. I don't know why. I'm an intelligent person. And so she had me draw out. She took up just a Walt Whitman poem. She had me write the poem down, and then she had me draw out every single word of the poem. And she had me draw it with my right hand, and she had to draw it with my left hand. Oh, wow. And I was like, this is impossible. But the main thing that she was doing was just getting me out of the words and into images. And I did this for a while. I had all kinds of colored pencils, and I was doing this, and I didn't know what I was doing, but I was just sort of like, I'll try what, if you hire a coach, you better try what they're saying. And something really ignited for me. And I at this point now, I don't do that anymore. I don't draw out everything, but it was just really something that made me go, oh, if I see it as an image, if I see it as a vivid, really vivid image, then I will know it for as long as I want to know it. And so then I started reading these books about, like you were saying, I didn't read the book that you were talking about, but I read some book from a memorization champion. And he started telling me about the mind palace. Do you ever use that in your techniques?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So the memory palace, or the mind palace, is, it's kind of a component of the images. So it's like you place the images in a geographical location, because that's the other thing that is also very compelling to the human mind is spatial geography. That's something that we're just evolved to remember these things. I guess, like, if you think of like what a hunter-gatherer life would have been like, that would have been helpful to remember images and spatial geography.
Mm-hmm.
The mind palace, or the memory palace, can be this thing that structures whatever it is you're trying to remember, so that you are able to remember it in the correct order.
In the correct order. Yeah. And I think that was what was really important for me too, because then I had the images, but then they had to be like in the right order. And so I started placing them in places. And then I had this cognition. I'm like, that's what I've been doing the whole time with stage acting. Is I had the memory palace was the stage. And I was placing lines all over the place, but I didn't know I was doing that. I was placing it with actions. I was placing it with every single thing that I was doing. And it just was happening in a very natural way. And then I was like, you know what, because of this, I can bring my memory palace wherever I want to go. And that was like, it just like, boom. And pretty soon people were asking me, how do you learn lines so fast?
Amazing.
Which is just an amazing experience. I want to play this one about state dependence.
You might be getting caught in something called state-dependent learning. This is a phenomenon where when we learn something, the environment we learned it in becomes encoded and tied to the memory of that thing. So if your learning environment and your performance environment are really different, this can end up throwing you off and make it really difficult to recall your lines when it comes time to perform. There are a couple ways you can go about trying to avoid this trap. Strategy 1, try to make your practice environment resemble your performance environment as much as possible. Really try to create the circumstances of what that audition will really be like. Strategy 2, another way you can try to avoid state-dependent learning, is to simply mix things up a lot. Try to practice in different places, in different ways, at different times.
Wow. That's fascinating. How did you come to that? Was that from studying?
Yeah, so it was, again, reading these books about cognitive psychology. It is a concept that they discovered, like, they've done studies on this where I think there was one that I can remember where they took scuba divers and they made them memorize like a list of words underwater, and then they tested them later. And I guess one set of scuba divers, they were tested above water. The other set, they test them again underwater. The people that memorized underwater and get tested underwater, they do better than the ones that memorized underwater and get tested on land. So just things like that. But they found it in multiple factors, not just underwater versus above water. But yeah, so like your mood, the time of day, the where you're actually located. So, exactly what you were talking about being on stage and, all the factors of the set, your movement, your
Clothing,
gestures,
anything. Yeah.
your costume, everything,
Yeah.
the lighting, all of those factors are being encoded when you're memorizing stuff. So yeah, like what you were saying, when you go into an audition room and it's just like total blanking, that's
Right.
what's happening. It's
Yeah.
because the environment is completely different. And so
Yeah.
you're not used to it. And so your mind just goes like, what? What were those lines again?
Yeah.
Yeah. And also I've definitely experienced, I think a lot of people experience, like it's so much easier to remember your lines once you have the blocking set. Like if
Yeah.
you're learning lines for a play,
Hmm.
say, like when you got the blocking down and you're actually playing around on the set, like it's just so much easier because right, the lines are actually tied to specific locations and the environment there and what you're
That's
actually
why it's
doing.
hard for actors to come into a sitcom or something like that when they have a small part. Because the people that are in the thing, they're already living in that environment. Everything is like so coded. And
Yeah.
then you're there like, "Wah." Do you have any techniques for people that are like coming into an environment like that just to get their mind focused?
To get their mind focused. Yeah, so I guess there's a couple different things. So like I sort of gave some of the advice when it came to the state dependent learning
Yeah.
on what you should try to do to kind of
I
overcome
was
that.
surprised when you said mix it
Um,
up. It does make sense. It does make sense.
Yes, yes. So that's the advice I mainly give when you have no idea what the environment is going to be, and that's usually the case when you've booked the job for something, right?
Hmm.
Like, um, so making sure that you are flexible enough where you can take direction and do things in different ways is to make sure that when you're practicing, you are you are not just doing it in this one single way over and over, like challenging yourself to come up with multiple interpretations or to try it in different ways, so that your memorization is independent of your environment as much as possible. So that once you get in there, you've already practiced it in different ways, in different places and stuff. So that new place won't completely throw you. Um, but other than that, like I definitely know people are dealing with nerves and things like that when they get on set. So like I always say it's important to have like a relaxation practice as an actor, something that you just go to and know that if I do this thing, it kind of calms me down and I can focus more. So that's why I love that you do like the breathing right at the
Yeah,
beginning
that's the
of,
purpose.
because yeah, that's so huge, like just taking the time, like just it only takes like a couple minutes to do some deep breaths, and just get grounded. And yeah, I love that because I get nervous too, like
Do you?
yeah,
Yeah.
before interviews and stuff. So like I love
Yeah.
that you did
That's good. I
the
do
three
it. I mean, I
breaths.
do it for myself and the guest and whoever else is out there because, and I can see the market difference from when the show starts to after I breathe, you know,
Yeah.
because it's powerful. The breath, it's very
It's
powerful.
so powerful, so important. Like it's just everything. It powers every aspect of your acting, right? Like, definitely that was like part of the training in school that I really appreciated. Just like
Yeah.
learning to like breathe.
Be in the moment, be present.
Yeah.
I had this revelation too after learning my own acting, whatever memorization techniques that I was learning through my friend Vernus, and then also on my own, was that I found out that in Shakespeare's time, and I'll put us in the Elizabethan theater here, in Shakespeare's time, at the Old Globe, they had pillars that were out in the audience, and they were different. Apparently, they were different colors, and the
I think I
actors
heard
would
about
put
this.
their lines in their mind on the different pillars, and and that's sort of like the memory palace. And the interesting thing about the memory palace is you can use it over and over and over again, which doesn't. I don't understand how the mind works. I don't understand it, but it seems like if you were to use the same memory palace over and over and over again, you'd get confused from the last time you used it. There'd be stuff still there, but there isn't. And I think it has to do with the way that things connect to one another. A lot of times, if you're trying to learn like two different, sometimes they're not just the words, sometimes they are just like a whole phrase, right? And maybe the image from this phrase will be interacting with the image in the next phrase. And one of the things I have found out through this technique is that I could do the lines backwards if I wanted to. I could do the whole scene backwards. And it's just as easy as doing it forwards. And when you walk into a room and you're like, I could do this scene backwards. There's a confidence that comes with it, that is just. I knew this guy a long time ago. He said he learned all the Hamlet monologues, so that when he was sitting in the waiting room, he could look around. If he felt intimidated, he could look around and say, there is no one else in here that knows all the Hamlet monologues.
I love that.
Something about that is really great. But also connecting these memory techniques, like what you're talking about, with the tradition of theater as we know it, is really powerful. It goes all the way back to the Greeks, like you were saying, like Greek outdoor theater where they'd wear the masks with the cones or whatever. They also had to use techniques to memorize.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that aspect of it, that, this is something that's it's part of human history. It's part of the intellectual history, the dramatic history, there's it goes back probably even further than the ancient Greeks. If you think of just like how oral storytelling was the way stories got told. It was always poetry, it was always song, and it's because poetry and song are so memorable, right? Like that's why the stories are told in that way. And it's only much later that prose comes to be more prominent. And it's just part of like human history. It's really deeply in us. So it's really cool.
And a lot of times we're ignoring that. And also the great thing about what you do is you give so many different ways to come at it that it becomes, if one technique falls, there's another one here to pick it up, so you feel really grounded. And it's really important as a performer or as a public speaker to feel grounded. And, otherwise people are just going to be like, this person doesn't know what they're talking about.
Yes. I agree. Well, I definitely tried to, take everything, like not just one avenue. Basically my method, I always talk about how I'm combining the insights from the three different fields of knowledge, where I'm taking it from cognitive psychology, which is more of like the scientific research that's kind of more recent. I'm taking it from those ancient memory techniques that go back to the ancient Greeks, but I'm also combining it with modern acting as well, because that is the, important aspect, where this is a script that is meant to be performed. That's a very specific thing. And we already have a lot of techniques as actors that we can integrate into the process. So
that makes total sense. You can integrate it into your acting technique, because that is there to help you as well with this same thing. And also I feel like if you have, your memory is not just a piece of paper, then it's so much richer, and you naturally will do things that humans do, like look up while you're trying to think, or visualize something as it's happening. Like if you're telling about something that just happened to you, like even in those ancient Greek plays, the messenger would run on and tell you about some horrible thing that happened or whatever. If that person is seeing that, and no matter what they're seeing, if they're seeing some real like images, it's going to be such a better performance than somebody who's seeing letters on a page or words on a page,
Absolutely. Like making it come alive.
Yeah.
That is what makes things memorable. And so like, I'm all about that. Just like, that like your memory techniques should enhance your performance. Your, performance techniques should also enhance the memorization.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
I'm going to play this one testimonial, which is really nice because the person talks about how it helped her.
When I saw memorization course, I was like, oh my gosh, hallelujah, somebody will be able to help me. The camera is this close. The camera knows when you can't find that line. I was just going up on lines here and there and then getting in my head about it, which makes it worse. And I needed some sort of technique. I tried things like audio learning them. I had tried like a technique where it was just the first letter of each word. I would on and on and on. And Joyce's technique ended up just being the key to opening up. Now I'm fully invested in my character that I'm bringing to the table because the lines are there. I don't have to grab for them anymore.
That is awesome. That is so great. I thank you so much for being on the show, Joyce. It's so generous of you to come on and talk with us about this. Here's your website. Thank you so much
for having me.
Oh, yes, of course. A pleasure. Anytime, too. Offbookit.com is your website. Is that right? You can go there and you can sign up for it. There's a course that you can take. You can contact Joyce if you wish. And I highly recommend it. And there's also even like a little free training video as well. Mm-hmm. So that's cool. Also, if you go to YouTube, you have a pretty robust YouTube channel with lots of tips out there for people. Mm-hmm. All right. So it's time to dance it out. Thank you very much for everybody in the chat room. I didn't get to everybody's comments. Howard Aronin says, great interview, Joel and Joyce. I apologize for my stupid memorization pun. Hopefully you've forgotten all about it. We love puns on this show. Yeah, there's some chatting going on there. Please share this with your friends, because a lot of times people, it's weird. They don't talk about this stuff. And we're talking about it before they replace our brains with computers. But still, we're going to have to know how to run those too. All right, so now dance break. We're going to dance it out. I got a fun song that I just really think is upbeat from Michael Gonzalez, who's been on the show. He's an actor and singer. So let's dance it out. Dance break time.
We're gonna ride till we fall. They say we got no future at all. They wanna keep us out, can't hold us down anymore. Gonna ride till we fall.
When we hit the bottom, nothing's gonna stop us. Climb to the top with you. We could be the greatest ones who ever made it. Yeah, I could be talking you. They're trying to hate, but we won't change anything at all. Oh, we're gonna rise till we fall. They think we just dropouts, living at our mom's house. Parents must be so proud, they know it all. They don't speak our language, they say we're too savage. Yeah, no, we don't give up anymore. We're gonna rise till we fall. We're gonna rise till we fall.
All right, thanks everybody for being here. It's been Lunch Therapy with Joyce Hshieh. We'll see you next week.